Welcome back to Beagle Eye Visions. We're going to do run through episode number 50, the sacred pillars of the CubbyWhole podcast. I reckon he's going to get more into some Freemasonic philosophy and some more allegory about the symbolisms of the tracing boards. It's going to get deep. This is one of those episodes you might want to listen to a few times, and then definitely do your own due diligence and do your own research into these topics. That way you can get a much better understanding, like what Nate Cap always says. I'm just gonna roam around the wasteland again. I'm definitely gonna have to switch games here soon because I'm kind of getting burnt out of Fallout. I'm not gonna lie. But I don't know. Maybe we'll see. We'll see. I'm gonna keep grinding. Episode number 50. Thank you for choosing Beagle Eye Visions.
Somebody can be higher than us if we give away our power. Because there's nobody, we're all equal. But we're not equal in our knowledge, so ultimately I think it does have to be a hierarchy, but it has to be a cooperative hierarchy, like a bee colony. It's about what our value system is, what we care about.
Hello, wild and intelligent hive mind. Today is October the 25th, 2021. I'm your host, Nate Cap. Welcome to the 50th CubbyWhole podcast, where important topics are unveiled, discussed, and tested. The website for this show is CubbyWhole.com. That's CubbyWhole.com. You can now listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Odyssey, YouTube, and much more. I want to say thanks to Brandon for getting the CubbyWhole podcast all up to speed on Odyssey and YouTube. Really appreciate that. So if that's a platform that you're used to listening to, definitely tune in and check us out on there. We are going to continue further into the Entered Apprentice today, okay? But first, I wanted to say thank you to those who have given feedback for these shows. It's been really awesome to hear people having a really great experience listening and learning. You know, I've been getting a lot of great feedback from people who seem to be really benefiting from this content. So that's pretty cool. And, I'm thankful. I'm thankful to hear that. It's really nice to know this type of information is reaching people in a positive way. Now, last week I covered much of the symbols in the tracing board known as the Entered Apprentice, including the checkerboard floor, the level, plumb rule, and square, also the dot with a circle, the greater lights, including the book with the square and compass on top. I covered the meaning of the compass under the square on the floor and the initiates, the three beings on the ladder, plus the anchor, the key, and the directions, especially west and east. And at the end, I began to speak about the two pillars of Joaquin and Boaz, the left and right pillar. Okay? And that's where I'm going to begin to navigate towards today, towards the pillars and the three eastern lights. Okay? So I made some slides for this show today, so make sure to follow along on the CubbyWhole website under the podcast section at the show number 50. A few things I'd like to put a finer point on before we explore the pillars is the Masonic words, true care, the tracing board, and the anchor, okay? Now, one thing I know really well when it comes to Masonic words is how cryptic they are, okay? You know, the whole science and language of Freemasonry is cryptic, and that's really, really important to understand. But what I'm trying to say is I really know how hard it is for beginners and skeptics to even approach wordplay with any type of seriousness, you know, because it's you know, we're raised to think or look at words, you know, at wordplay and puns as jokes only. We're taught that there's nothing more to a word than, you know, what its definition says or how it's supposed to sound, right? But it really is important to understand, especially in Freemasonry, how encoded or how encrypted it is. And when we learn how to entertain words phonetically, you know, how we hear the similar sound in words, then we at least are seeing how there may be or may not be something more encoded into the words that we're dealing with when looking into the mysteries, into the mystery traditions. We really have to remember that if we are dealing with what's known as the oldest mystery tradition, known as Freemasonry, a science of symbols, used not only in a positive, symbolic way, but also a perverted and twisted way, used for control, well, then it's only logical that the language of Freemasonry is encoded in all language, including the letters and numbers that the majority of the world uses every day, right? And has for a very long time. So the letters and numbers we use every day are, in fact, symbols. And you better believe that most of them, if not all numbers and letters, are Masonic in their origin. And my point is that when we are studying the occult, and especially the occult, then we must think dualistically in terms of thinking phonetically and literally if we are to, you know, keep an open mind to words meaning something more than just their surface meaning, their exoteric meaning, their outer meaning. Okay? Their generic meaning. And this type of thinking or this type of language in Freemasonry is known as green language, which is something we've talked about many times on this show and something I'll be going further into as we continue. And I actually broke down the green language in my newest presentation, Reillumination of the Imagination. But this language is also known as phonetic law and the art of light. So when you hear any words that are specifically or especially unique to Freemasonry, then it's a good practice to look deeper into those words. And I'm saying this because as I move through these symbols and usage of Masonic words, I realize how it can be pretty hard for many to understand the significance in the connections, right? We have to realize that many words are encrypted for the serious student to unravel in order to, you know, see further or in order to find the answer that can't be found in the common vernacular, right? It's so freaking crazy how encrypted it is, but it's really important if we're really trying to understand ourselves and understand the language that helps us get back into understanding our origins. And it's not just limited to humans who've encrypted this language. It's also, you know, the universe. We're getting some help from the universe in this way. The universe is always speaking in more ways than we can imagine. But it's also important to keep in mind that sometimes words and symbols just don't have much more depth to them, right? There's just nothing more to them. It's when you've left no stone unturned, so to speak. You've looked through everything and you just realize, well, there's nothing more to this symbol, and you move on, and that's okay. And we can't fear being wrong when looking deeper into words either. If we are using the trivium process and using logic with the word and its actual definition and etymology, then we are, we're being more honest in our approach, which gives more validation to the conclusion that we come to. So that's something important that I feel needs to be addressed as we move through these topics, okay? So I wanted to, I'm going to switch gears here. There's something I really wanted to clear up and expand on, which is the word trestle. Now, the word trestle is interesting, and as you've listened to me speak about it, I've been learning more about it. It simply means a support of something, okay? It's like an easel. And now my further understanding of it is it's the support or board we trace upon, okay? So trestle is the board used on the floor of the house, the Masonic house, the lodge, right? It's it's on the pavement. And Masons have traditionally traced in chalk. They've traced on this trestle board they use this trestle board as the tracing board, the outline of the floor plan or lodge arrangement, for the ornaments and the jewels. And this is about being able to trace the symbols and degrees on the trestle board. So the trestle board supports the act of tracing out the lodge. Now, on that note, something else that I wanted to just really hammer home is this important point regarding the tracing board and the word tracing. The more of the word play on tracing. Now, on the last show, I mentioned how the tracing board is about tracing ourselves back to our origins and how it transcends space-time. And that's the key here, okay? When we deeply learn the principle of correspondence and then study this image, we realize that it really is simply a symbolic mirror of the self. It's a map of consciousness symbolically. It's consciousness being traced down. And because this Masonic map is a representation of our temple, our soul, our aggregated lodge, our aggregated consciousness, then we can logically conclude that with the knowledge we pull from this image, or the information we pull from this image as we bring knowledge to it, from this tracing board, we can begin to understand the symbols, right, of our ancient past, aka the Great Pyramids, and also what the pyramid builders preserved for us to discover and understand. And if you're on the podcast page on show number 50, you'll see that I made a little layover with the opacity turned down of the tracing board. And it says tracing board at the top, but you'll see the three pyramids. You'll see the left, middle, and right pyramid. You'll see the north pyramid on the left and the south pyramid on the right. And then you see the two hemispheres, the two brain hemispheres, the left-brained hemisphere and the right-brained hemisphere, okay? So what I'm saying here is that if we truly wish to understand our origins and the ancient world, then we must learn the timeless symbolic language of Freemasonry, which this is about the translation of the deeper knowledge stored in these symbols that transcends the limitations of our modern language of today, right? So that's what these tracing boards are about. That's what they can do. It's a kind of pure communication with the past and the present. So tracing ourselves, kind of like tracing a map that leads to what? It leads to gold, spiritual gold, or truth. It's a map that conceals the higher knowledge of self. It's universal, okay? So I really wanted to just kind of clear that up. And another part that I mentioned that I'd like to talk about a little more is the key. So the key, as I stated on the last show, the key equals care. And just to add a little more green language and allegory to this part, we are in search for gold or truth, right? With a map, this tracing board, right? We're in search for gold or alchemical gold, right? Now, think of what gold is found in typically, and in stories, in some kind of like a fictional story. It's found in a treasure chest, right? And what is it that's found in us, in our chest, our literal chest? It's our heart, right? So it's our heart where gold is found. It's the key, the care that unlocks the spiritual chest to the heart, the heart of true self-love and heart-based intelligence. It's the very thing most are in search for, yet they haven't read the map, right? They haven't discovered the map. They've either ignored the map or they just haven't found it, okay? And if you're here now, then obviously you've discovered it. But of course, it's definitely on you to find the key to unlock your own treasure chest, to find your own care, to unveil your own mystery. And that's what this directional map is here for. It's here, and it's up to you to use and discover the treasure, okay? And it's also no surprise that there's an anchor in the middle with the middle fellowcraft initiate on the ladder. And of course, we get the connection with an anchor associated with a ship and a captain looking for treasure, right? So it's about you being the captain of your own ship. It's up to you to go on this journey, to find the key, to find your care, and then take this map to discover the gold. The gold in the chest, in your heart. And many people think that the Great Pyramids have had treasure within them. And, there's truth to that. But the real treasure there is within you. That's why the word holds the answer in itself. The word pyramid, which is pyra, mid, which is fire in the middle. So pyra meaning fire and mid meaning middle. And fire in the middle, this is about the heart, which is symbolic of what? Care. We have to re-illuminate care. Re-illuminate care. And we have to re-illuminate our imagination to navigate the science and symbols to do so. And we do this through what? Care. Care itself is something that I believe begins to ignite once we realize how important and how much of an appreciation there is for this type of knowledge, especially knowledge of self. And it's when we realize true purpose and the value of being free from rulership of others. It's when we begin to, truly realize our sovereignty and that worship of man's authority is what's holding humanity back from living harmonious in nature, where our true being is really found. Okay? And then caring enough to do something constructive to break the layers of chains that bind the soul from evolving into the higher type, our higher potential. So care is about doing the great work, coming online and taking in higher knowledge of self and aligning to natural law, putting principles first. And that's what this tracing board is all about. It's that unique journey that we're all individually on. Okay? The image of Solomon's temple is an enormous encyclopedia that we can come to and care enough to pull from it the structure of the inner sciences of self. So we could just keep bringing tons of valuable knowledge to this image, and we will receive something from it, especially as we ruminate on it and meditate on it and really soak it in, because it is us, just in a archetypal form. So let's look at the pillars on this tracing board, okay? This tracing board of the Temple of Solomon. And I briefly covered these on the last show, and I'm going to go ahead and rehash what I already mentioned, but with a further explanation. Now, if you're following along with the slides, especially the slide of the whole image of the entered apprentice, the Temple of Solomon, you'll see 3 columns or 3 pillars. And the pillar on the left is known as the pillar of Jachin. And the pillar on the right is the pillar of Boaz. And then the middle pillar is referred to as Jacob's ladder. And this is the wisdom pillar. Now, what we really need to understand before learning these pillars is how seeing dualistically is how we arrive at seeing unified or unity, okay? And what I mean is we can't understand the one without understanding the two, as in we can't understand the whole without understanding its parts. And like I said about the yin-yang symbol, first we need to understand the yin and the yang before we can see and understand the whole yin-yang, which is the one, okay? So understanding the dark helps us understand light, and understanding light helps us understand dark, which then it eventually helps us understand both as one. And once we understand the left and the right pillars, then we can begin to erect and understand the middle pillar, the one, okay? We have to contemplate with the principle of correspondence. That's really, really important. We have to contemplate with the principle of correspondence to really realize how and why these pillars are symbolic of our brain hemispheres. Okay? The left pillar is mirroring the left brain. The right pillar is mirroring the right brain. Okay? And the middle pillar is mirroring the whole brain, which is about being unified spiritually. I mean, the middle pillar is also really about, it's like the unification of the right and left, where the corpus callosum is located, right down the middle of the brain, where the pineal is. So it's about understanding the pineal as well. But this is about erecting this middle pillar spiritually. And as we learn the principle of gender, we understand that the whole universe is made of masculine and feminine energy, right? Like the yin yang. And we have the feminine yin energy, which is dark, and the masculine yang energy, which is light. So then the left pillar is the pillar of light. And light is the penetrative force in nature. And the right pillar is the shadowy pillar of darkness. Darkness is submissive to light. So masculine energy of light is the penetrative force that the darkness submits to and receives. It's passive to it. Okay, so think of the sun's light as masculine energy, which it is, that penetrates the submissive Mother Earth or the lunar moon surface or the black waters of space. This is how we learn the simple science of the gender principle. And we need this understanding in order to realize the importance of these pillars, okay? Now, looking at the left pillar, the pillar of Jachin, this is the masculine pillar, the pillar of light. It's the column pointing at the sun on the top, okay? The top left. So this is the pillar, the solar pillar. And the S on the bottom represents strength and also represents serenity and stableness. And this is the active pillar. It's the positive pillar. And this is the pillar that holds the keys to understanding our left-brained aspects of consciousness, which are intellect, logic, science, and among others, analytical thought, okay? So the left hemisphere is correspondence to this left pillar, and this is in the northern part of the map, which is what we really need to keep in mind, as this is something I really want to explain later, but the symbol that isn't on this board that needs to be understood is the symbol that corresponds to the left brain or left pillar, which is the delta. And the delta is the Masonic equilateral triangle. And this equilateral triangle is, in this case, symbolically representing the blade and the elemental fire symbol of the masculine pillar, okay? Or the masculine energy. So this is the equilateral triangle, the delta. And it's all part of understanding the sacred masculine principle, the left pillar. So I really just want you to understand that. That's very, very important that we really ingrain that into our mind, that that's what that is. I mean, it's already there, but this is to help us understand that part of ourselves. Now, looking to our right, the south side direction of this trestle board, this tracing board, we see the shadowy dark pillar. Okay, the pillar on the right. The pillar of Boaz, which is lunar and points up towards the moon. So the B on the base of the pillar represents Boaz, or beauty. This is the sacred feminine pillar, and this pillar conceals the sacred feminine aspects of consciousness, including creativity, big picture thinking, intuition, compassion, and so on. So it's the negative and passive pillar. And again, not negative in a bad way, negative as in negative space. That's what really needs to be understood here. Like negative in the sense of receiving light. It's not a...
Somebody said there are no horses in Fallout. Actually, why are there no horses in Fallout? What the hell?
bad thing. It's a passive energy. And this sacred energy is symbolic of the chalice, which is the inverted triangle. And this inverted triangle is the elemental water symbol as well, okay? So one way to think of the triangles regarding the sacred masculine and sacred feminine is the masculine equilateral triangle is the fire symbol, and the fire corresponds to the fiery sun, okay? And then the inverted triangle is the water symbol, and water is part of understanding emotion, okay? So the lunar sacred feminine energy. And this is true when we understand and observe that the moon, the lunar, governs the direction or tides of water. And obviously, everybody knows that we're all made of water, mostly water, right? Okay. So this is something that we really need to keep in mind when we arrive into the fellowcraft degree as well. So looking at the slide of the alchemical wedding, now once we begin to work on and balance our pillars, our brain hemispheres, then Jacob's ladder begins to erect, okay? The middle pillar, known as the pillar of wisdom, begins to erect. And when we apply our knowledge of the trivium, the esoteric trivium process, we understand that first comes knowledge, and then an understanding of that knowledge, which then leads to wisdom, the rhetoric and output, right? So wisdom is the action of what we do with what we know and understand. So knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. And as we become conscious of the dual pillars, we come to an understanding where we can produce and demonstrate what we know and understand. And this begins to unify the left and right pillars into one, into the middle pillar. This is the union or light wedding. It's the alchemical wedding. It's the spiritual bridge built from both sides of the hemispheres, where the keystone bonds them in the middle, and the perfected ashlar is fitted for its sturdy foundation. Okay? And this is where the sacred feminine spiritual inverted triangle, the chalice and the sacred masculine triangle or blade, where they come together unifying as mind. And it's important that when we study the alchemical wedding, that we think of three in terms of thought, emotion, and action. So you have the father, the mother, and the child, or the creator, the Holy Ghost, and the Son. The Father being the thoughts, the Holy Ghost being the emotions or spirit or mother, and the Son being the child, the Son or the action. This is the science of the Holy Trinity, okay? So if you really want to understand the Holy Trinity, you have to understand the three, including the three aspects of consciousness: thought, emotion, and action. The Father, the Mother, and the child, the Creator, the Holy Ghost, and the Son. Okay? That's how we arrive at understanding the Holy Trinity. We have to understand that the child in the Trinity is represented as the Son, because the Son is masculine, which is the active principle, as is wisdom. So wisdom is the masculine principle. That's part of understanding the masculine principle. Wisdom is a masculine expression combined with the sacred feminine emotion, which creates a real synthesis of true care. And this manifests right, correct, and moral actions that we see in the world. And wisdom is the application of what? It's the application of knowledge through understanding, which means the sacred child is always masculine because it's an active principle. It manifests from a balanced positive emotion and intuition of the sacred feminine and thoughts of the sacred masculine. Okay? So remember, thought, emotion, and action when you look at these pillars, when you're thinking of the Holy Trinity. And on that note, I'd like to have you look at the slide that says stereoscopy. the one with the ionic pillar, the double side-by-side photo of the same photo of the ionic pillar. Now, this is a really neat Oculus or eye experiment that I feel helps the imagination understand this tracing board a little better, a little deeper. And if you're not familiar with this experiment, that's really awesome. It's basically a technique for enhancing or creating the illusion of depth in an image in the way that, you know, binocular vision is. So it's a way of stereopsis. And the word stereoscopy derives from the Greek stereos, which means firm, solid, and scopio, which means to look, to see. So what you do with this image is, if you're looking at the two pillars, you just slowly cross your eyes until you see the third pillar in the middle. Now, take your time and make sure your head and eyes are in a, you know, level position, so that way both pictures create a really nice solid one right in the middle. So you should see one really way more defined pillar in the middle. You should see two other pillars on the right and left that you're not really looking at those, but because you're crossing your eyes. But what should happen is both of those pillars should meet right in the middle, and you see this really crisp pillar. Now, this is an interesting technique that I shared in my newest presentation, and I felt it was a helpful way to translate the alchemical marriage of the pillars, okay? You know, with an actual visual of high definition, because that's what spiritual marriage does to our vision. It allows us to be in a, you know, balanced frequency and see in a higher resolution. And it helps that this image is of pillars, you know, to really help me convey what I'm trying to say. But I also, I put some other stereoscopy images up if you want to try those. And they're pretty cool as well. I think the one with the bird really stands out the most. I think that one looks visually the coolest out of all of them, or out of the three that I shared. But the one with the pillars, to me, is the most important with what I'm trying to help people understand. But the reason I'm having people try this technique is to inspire their imagination to get the idea of two eyes or two pillars coming together in order to have a higher resolution of seeing, or you know, both hemispheres of the brain coming together and working in unison to gain clarity or high resolution, especially understanding knowledge inwardly, like this, like what you're gathering from this tracing board regarding Freemasonry. So you can look at this technique like an old, you know, 1990s box TV versus a new 4K flat screen. The definition is way better on the flat screen, right? And, you know, we have to ask ourselves, what is the reason for that? Well, obviously it's because technology has advanced, right? Well, the same is true for our mind. And as we individually advance inwardly, we evolve spiritually. It's about evolving our spiritual technology. We advance in being able to see and understand the occult, the hidden realm, with clarity. It's about rays of light to see clearer. It's about raising in consciousness from dark to light. So with the stereoscopy experiment, we physically look outwardly with our eyes crossed to cause a higher definition of the one middle pillar made by two, right? Now mirror that physical experiment in your mind, in your imagination, spiritually, and what you'll get is the light wedding of the hemispheres or pillars, which obviously takes time and knowledge to understand. But it's the two hemispheres of the brain symbolically coming together inwardly in unison to find clarity, the higher resolution in what we know. And then we ask ourselves, how is this done? Well, it's done through knowledge of the aspects of both hemispheres, knowledge of self, right? That's what this whole tracing board is for, which is gaining a higher resolution of self and evolving. And as we trace ourselves, we gain that higher resolution. So it's about the more wisdom we produce and give, the more we are able to build this middle pillar, which then that means the more we realize who or what I is. It's about the big question, who am I? Or who is I? And this pillar with the all-seeing eye above the middle pillar, this corresponds to the lowercase I symbol. Okay, the lowercase letter I symbol. The microcosmic universe. And as we continue on this quest, I becomes more revealed. And I myself can't tell you who you are because I'm not your authority, as is anybody else. Okay? But I can say that as we understand this science further, we realize that I is not here to be a slave. The more knowledge we bring to this degree, or to these degrees, the more the EYE, the I, becomes filled with light. And that's because it's ionic. This pillar structure is ion IC. The more I is on, the more I see, because it's ionic. See, that's what's encrypted in that word. Now, looking at the slides that says column capitals, these are drawings of the tops of actual physical columns, okay? So the middle pillar is the ionic column, and then the left masculine pillar is the Doric column, and the right feminine pillar is the Corinthian column. Now, these are Greek style structures, okay? And as we are observing them, we can see that the Doric column is smooth and more plain, okay? To where when we look at the Corinthian pillar, this is the most beautiful of the three columns, right? And the lines or flutings going up and down are more appealing, and the rows of acanthus leaves at the top of the capital of the column they're more pleasing to the eye. Just like the moon is more pleasing to the eye than the sun, right? So that's really important that we pay attention to the architecture as well, because it corresponds the feminine and masculine principles, okay? Now, we are going to go to the northeast side of this tracing board and study the sun. What is the sun? I actually have no idea what the sun is, and I believe nobody else does either. But what we do know is if we don't have the sun's light in our lives, then what happens? We're doomed, right? Now think about that. Think about that in correspondence to consciousness. If we don't have light, we roam around in darkness. We're roaming in ignorance. Okay? So we have to understand how the whole world, the whole universe, the celestial bodies are helping us understand ourselves by understanding what they do for us. You know, the sun, rises over the horizon, and we can look at our consciousness like rising. But where does it rise from? It rises from the darkness, because before the sun comes up, it's dark, right? So if we can learn to look at consciousness in the same way that the sun rises and falls, then we will have the keys to understanding what these mystery traditions are trying to help us understand about ourselves, and what the ancients were trying to tell us hundreds of thousands of years ago, and what the sciences that they put into the zodiac, right? So the symbol of the sun is of really high importance and significance when it comes to Masonry. This is the source material light, the sun. And it reminds the student of the intellectual light that is constantly sought after, and searched for or chased after. The sun is the ruler of the day sky. The sun indicates a beginning and an end. It is the light and the rays from early day to sunset. It is symbolic of all four seasons, okay? It is the S-O-N that comes as the savior with light as life. It represents truth, as truth is the hardest thing to look at, right? This is what it's meant when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Okay, so Jesus is the archetypal sun. Okay, I feel like a broken record saying this, but it's not about whether real Jesus actually lived or not. Okay, we have to also, if you believe Jesus, fine. But we also have to look at Jesus as an archetype. And I think that's where we're really going to find the most enlightenment, is looking at that, not whether someone named Jesus actually lived or not. Okay.
All right, that's a good spot to take a break. We will be back. Thanks again if you made it this far. We're going to go to the Suffolk County. Where were we headed? Oh no, the South Boston High School to look for some ceramic and more materials for water purification. And then we will get more Masonic knowledge from the very legendary NACAP. Make sure you check out Mark Passio's newest presentations. He just put out 4 presentations on the What on Earth is Happening YouTube channel and the website. Be sure to check it out. There's also an amazing website called whatonearthishappening.wtf by my good friend and co-host of Crazy Life Stories, Dennis Gilmore. An author, he's a legend. He knows what's up. He's been doing a lot of the one great work recently. He's been doing a lot of good stuff. He's been translating these presentations in different languages, and if you want to read the presentations as opposed to listening to them, you can go to that website, whatonearthishappening.wtf, and find it all there. Or Dennis Gilmore's Substack is another great resource for a lot of information, a lot of different rabbit holes. But thanks again if you made it this far. Stay tuned, stay golden. if you want to support the channel, use code BeagleEyeVision at w.gg. They are the sponsor, and if you make a purchase, you get 10% off, and Beagle Eye Visions gets 10% off the purchase. So if you want to make an order, that'd be awesome. Appreciate it. Stay tuned and stay golden.